Hey, Phil.
Hey, how's it going?
So far so good. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I just got back from climbing. We just came out of lockdown a couple of days ago, so my wife and I were keen to go back to the climbing wall. We like doing climbing, and my fingers are like on fire. You know, when you've not used a muscle, but like with fingers, they experience it a whole nother level, I think. So,
Oh,
um,
but how fun that you got to go out and do something that you enjoy.
yeah,
It's
it's
kind of hot down here, so yay.
Yeah, I'm ready for a bit of a couple of friends went along as well, and so we're climbing separately, but
Yeah.
can chat a little bit, socially distance, and it's the first time seeing people in a month. It's just like, oh, it's just nice,
Yeah.
you know.
And it's been, 8 months of limited interactions and seeing
Yeah,
people. I think we're all feeling it. I mean, I'm sure feeling it. We
yeah.
just, my girls at school, they never went back to school, but about a third of the school was going in.
Okay.
And we opted out. We didn't want them to go, but they just closed for the rest
Oh
of the year.
wow.
So, and the whole city is closing down because we keep getting numbers that are high, and
Yeah,
I think we're at 15% capacity in our ICUs, so we won't open.
it's wild. It's really wild, and like a whole nother level for you guys. I mean, the UK is doing badly, but by like global scale, kind of like, we're doing badly, but like I feel bad, but on some level, I feel almost somewhat grounded looking at America because it's terrible. It's a very privileged position from Europe looking at America and going, oh, at least I'm not that bad. But God,
Yeah,
it's
as
really
much
bad over there. And I mean, at least you're in
yeah,
California, right? So you're in one of the better options of being in America right now. Most people would be like, oh, pick California over a lot of places.
for sure.
But it's heartbreaking. And then you see people like, Sean Foyt's, he did a huge crusade thing in San Diego, right? He did a big beach thing or,
He did, and we fought it, and he had a protest permit, so the city couldn't do anything.
yeah.
Which using a protest, like it's just ugly all around. But as usual, the U.S. is leading, uh, in a negative way, showing the
Yeah.
world how not to do things.
Well, had to
But
be number one at something.
always this obsession.
Wow. Does it feel like a tide is turning? Do you feel like there's quite a bit of hope with, Biden maybe coming in January? Presuming that kind of comes. Like, do you feel like there's going to be some sort of shift, or does it feel just there's so much dualism and kind of like extremism that, changing the top, is that going to help? It's still got these protests and,
Some things will be better, but I mean, I think the damage that the Trump administration has caused is going to take years. Like I
mm,
think he set this country back probably a decade or two. So it's going to take years to undo. Like the amount of distrust of the government, which is some of it is fair, but it's distrust without any facts. It's
yeah,
this what is the word? Theories, like just conspiracy theories, the
yeah,
conspiracy theories and the nonsense and the amount of changes in immigration laws and in a whole bunch of things that are going to take just time, a long time to change. And in the meantime, people's lives are actually affected. Like,
yeah,
like some people don't have years.
yeah.
So some things will be better for sure. Like at least he's going to try to put a like he just already said that he's going to ask everybody to wear masks for 100 days.
100 years.
We can't do that for a
It
hundred
feels
days.
like it, right? That just feels like this one year was 100 years.
And I think that some people are going to be like totally, but at the same time, Trump has emboldened
Yeah, he
people to
has.
say, no, I don't care about you, and I'm not going to do that. So
Yeah.
really sad.
Yeah, it's a tough dynamic. I was talking to, have you come across Corey Leake? I just recorded a podcast with him yesterday.
Yeah.
He's an awesome guy. Yeah, just phenomenal. And I was talking about this with him because obviously he's straddling this world of deconstruction, faith, decolonization, the whole issue of race and a lot of the politics behind that. And so we were having an interesting conversation about it, but it feels like this has kind of come out of nowhere. Now, I know that's an incredibly privileged position, especially as someone in the UK. And I've been dealing with that in my own way of going, oh, holy crap, the UK is still really racist. Like, and grieving the degree to which I was blind to that and a part of that and dealing with that in my own way. But it feels like, there was a kind of sentiment in America of like, oh, we just had a black president and we're like above this and this whole thing. And then you have like this extreme flop, to a whole nother level of racism and all sorts of different stuff that was present for sure, but felt like it was maybe more of an undercurrent for quite a while recently. Or is that unfair, or what's going on? Would you say that it has caused this kind of explosion, or at least is it we're just recording stuff more? Is it that we're just putting stuff out more?
Well, a little bit of it is we're recording things more, but a little bit of it is the fact that we had a black president, and white supremacy doesn't like when we take power away from it, So it feels like this is a direct response to, you are not going to take space that you're not supposed to take, and we're going to put you back in your place. And I mean, and look at the black president we had, right? It's a black president that was white raced and white indoctrinated too, in a way. Like, we are not talking about a Black Panther here, we're talking about a man that fits really well inside of white supremacy. And even then, the pushback of white supremacy, the system, not the people, but the system, is we have to remind them that they don't have that much power. So we're going to put the most white supremacist man up and, embolden white supremacy as a reminder that this continues to be a white supremacist state. And of course, they don't do any of that consciously. It's all subconscious.
Sure, yeah.
But I think it's a direct response of having a black president. And we will continue to have, white supremacy will continue to lash out every time it loses power. That's why when you have people like me that speak about white supremacy, they get so angry. But if it's a white person talking about white supremacy, they don't get as angry because they don't feel like they are losing power. You continue to be white and you are entitled and allowed to have power. I am not. And they need to remind me of that. I think it's a response, like having a black president scared white supremacy. It's, it made it obvious that white supremacy is losing power. And there's nothing they can do about it, but they sure can stop the movement forward.
Yeah, or certainly slow it tremendously, or, the kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of component. And I get that, like on so many levels. I'm a control freak. So I get it when I see someone taking something that I'm like, oh, I want that, or I need that, or like, that's mine, I deserve that, or I don't know, like, when there's one piece of chocolate cake in the cupboard and Till has it for dinner, and I was expecting that. How could you do that? There's something that rises to me, it triggers this fear, this whatever, and it's over something really small. And these are things that are, through systemic upbringing, these are things that are huge, right? These are the things that our parents warned us about. These are the things that we were told this is going to be the end of civilization as we know it if something like this happens. If there was ever a black president, if gay people can ever marry, if this thing happens, everything is. And on some level, that's the message of my dad, who I love, who took me fishing every week, or, took me to ball games. And he told me from the earliest age, you got to watch out for the liberals. You got to watch out that other nationalities don't take over America. The American dream is for Americans. Or like, there's this deep-seated thing in people that, like you're saying, it's so unconscious. It's subconscious. Most of it. I of course, there's very explicitly racist people out there. We've met a lot of those the last few years on other levels, but it feels like it is this war subconsciously, and how we wage war at a subconscious level is a really complex thing. It feels really, really impossible on some levels. I'm sure it isn't. But
we are determined that it isn't, right? Because in different ways, both you and I were indoctrinated into white supremacy. It just didn't benefit me, but I was indoctrinated into it as much. The reason I went to America, and we can talk about this, but because I think it's similar, the reason I moved to America was because it is here. It is here that they had Christianity right. Like, we are indoctrinated into these notions and beliefs, and white supremacy where it's internalized. We all internalize it, whether we wanted to or not, watching TV shows. I was actually watching Descendants. I don't know if you watch Descendants because you don't have children. But Descendants is this show on Disney about the children of all the villains and the heroes of all the Disney. So you have, the son and the son or daughters of Cruella de Vil and Maleficent and everybody. And these kids are grappling with the fact that because they are children of the bad guys, then they are bad guys, and the good guys are good guys, and they are divided. And so there is a lot of very interesting dynamics because they realize that they don't have to be bad because they are, their descendants were bad or their ancestors were bad. But I was telling my husband, it's really interesting because the first bad girl that turns good is a white girl that is Maleficent's daughter, and the good king is a white king, and the good kids are white, and the first one that is a bad girl is black. And those are subconscious messages that we're being sent, and people are more conscious and aware of that nowadays, so it happens a lot less. But for always watching movies, and it's this subconscious programming that white good, black bad, brown bad, accent bad. Certain accents are bad, some other accents are good. Women scary and tricksters, and men trustworthy if they are white. So all of these notions that we are indoctrinated into, that whether we want to admit it or not, it's inside of us, and we need to become conscious of it. So I talk about this in the sense of resurrection, because to me, resurrecting is waking up from that, waking up from the subconscious conditionings and the being basically zombies that just are moved by the systems of oppression, are told what to believe, how to behave, what to desire, instead of waking up and realizing that's not really serving any of us. I don't need that. And it's actually harming a lot of people, sometimes including me. So, and the only reason I know is because it's work that I had to do. It's work that I had to awaken to. So I would have never even, I wasn't fully conscious of how much internalized racism was inside of me until I was able to be conscious, Yeah. And so while racism needs to be challenged and we need to hold them accountable and we need to tell them, I think that keeping in mind that they are not racist bad people, but they are indoctrinated, traumatized, racist people makes a world of difference, because the way that we engage changes everything. So we let go of the dualism of bad and good. Like, oh, now I'm a good guy and you're a bad guy. But before I was still a good guy, even though I was in this, wherever I am, I'm going to choose to be the good guy. And we have to mature past that and be able to say, we're all just traumatized people making choices with the tools we have and the information we have. And what we need to do is raise our collective consciousness.
No, it feels like, I'm looking at myself and trying to educate myself and all the things I'm doing, but I can probably draw some lines in the sand where there was major shifts for me on the whole, but it does feel a bit like a night and day awakening. It does feel like I can probably go, oh, I don't know exactly, but it was around this month I went from being racist to anti-racist, and that probably isn't entirely true, right? On some level, there was probably a whole bunch of ebbs and flows, but what I do know is if you had called me racist before I had a awakening and woke up, I'd have gone, no, I'm not racist. And I would have really honestly thought, and maybe honestly could say on the vast majority of things, I wasn't explicitly racist. That's probably not entirely fair. I still maybe would have laughed at a racist joke, or just, who knows what it might be, or maybe would have had a response to a black person a certain way or something like, not entirely, but on the whole, I think I would have been able to look at my life and go, I'm not explicitly racist, but I wouldn't have had the language for that. Racist would just mean immediately, you're a bad person, you're all these things. And now, as an anti-racist, it still makes my gut sink. We've talked before, I'm like, I live for the day that Joe Luehmann shows up and goes, Phil fucked up this way by saying this, and this is how it needs to change. I live for that because I want to change, but I also have this sinking feeling in my gut, the feeling where you're like, oh, I did something wrong. And I still have that. I have that tension anytime I talk about race. I'm thinking, Phil, don't fuck up. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't, because I don't want people to think I'm racist. Or if I'm talking to someone that's trans, I'm like, oh, especially right now, anytime I'm trying to watch what I say and be sensitive to pronouns or this, don't fuck up, right? We all have that feeling. And it feels like having this war waged at the conscious level, the explicit level, we're just clashing in some of the most unhelpful ways, it feels, because people aren't hearing that message at all. Like now, if you said to me, Phil, you're being racist, I'd have been like, oh, that sucks. But okay, tell me how, because I want to understand and I want to try and change. If you'd said that to me 3, 4, 10 years ago, I would have gone, no, I'm not. I'd have got really defensive. I'd have been really upset. We would have had a dialogue that's probably like most of the people you share your stories, which end up with you being blocked and, you know, them being like going on some defensive diatribe. That would have been me. I'm very conscious of that. And it makes you feel like shame, regret, all sorts of emotions might come up. But it was me. I can't change who I was. And that was my story.
But we can, because here you are.
Yes. So I just mean I can't change that. What was, right? It's the past. I can't.
We want people to change immediately. We tell people, like, we hold them accountable and we say, like, hey, can I explain to you why that's problematic? And we want them to respond immediately with, yes, please, thank you. I love when nobody's going to respond that way. I still some days don't respond that way. You know, when I mess up, sometimes I have to breathe through my fragility too. And I have to be like, this isn't personal. Breathe. Like I've talked about this a lot. I like to talk about this because it's really helpful for people to understand that your brain is trying to protect you. So the moment that I call you racist, your brain is going to shut down. And what fragility is an actual chemical process that is happening inside of your body. And it doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you awful. It just makes you human. The problem is not responding, like the problem is not feeling that fragility. It's not, you know, the fragility rising inside of you. The problem is responding to that fragility with absolute, I will not. And having an inability to be self-aware enough to realize, whoa, I'm totally defensive right now. I need to breathe through these and try to, why am I so defensive? But we are not, what is the word? Societally, all together, all of us, you know, collectively, we are not emotionally fit to be able to do that.
I think that's a very fair assumption that most of us would draw that conclusion pretty quickly, just having a broad look at where we're at right now.
To raise our emotional fitness, you know, to work, because people say, like, we just have to be empathetic, and that's not true. Empathy it's very natural. You know, humans are empathetic. We are actually hardwired to not want to hurt another person. That's the way we're hardwired. Humans don't want to hurt another person. The only way that you can hurt another person is if you think that you are being harmed yourself, or if you've dehumanized them in your brain. Those are the only two ways: self-defense, or you stop seeing them as humans altogether. But you don't know that's happened in your brain. So racism, transphobia, homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, fat phobia, all of these things, what they've done is they've dehumanized the other so that I can excuse myself from harming you. And it's happening subconsciously. So I need to become conscious of it. So everybody's like, I'm totally empathetic. I'm an empathetic person. Yeah, towards your own. So what we need to do is raise our emotional fitness so that instead of caring so much about my emotions, I am able to look at the emotional map of the conversation and of the emotional map of society and be able to say, okay, what you're saying is valid, even though my intent wasn't that. I need to understand my impact. And I appreciate you taking the time to come to me to tell me that. And I'm going to check my own fragility so that I can rise beyond you know, my own backfire effect. That's what it's actually literally called, is the backfire effect. It just shuts your brain down and you cannot, your frontal cortex is gone. You're not thinking clearly anymore. And your entire body is telling the rest of your brain is telling the rest of your body, defend, defend, defend. You're being attacked. So until we are conscious of those processes inside of us, we're not going to be able to stop them. And basically what we have to do is, my brain is hijacking my ability to engage with another person. I need to breathe. I need to open up my brain again so that I don't get hijacked anymore by my own brain. And that's hard work. It's hard work, but I think that we're doing it. And it doesn't happen on the, it doesn't only happen on the personal level, it happens on the collective level too. Because when people are assholes to me, sometimes I respond like an asshole too, but for the most part, I try to respond with care, and I try to understand, okay, you are triggered. And I say that sometimes to them, you know, I actually like the word more activated. One of my friends just taught me the word, I said, I don't like triggered. And she's like, me either. And she said, activated. And I was like, yeah, I like that better. So recognizing you're activated right now, something that I said made you feel threatened. could you take a minute to just breathe through that? I'm not trying to harm you. I was just trying to explain to you how you've harmed me. And being able to have those conversations and see the other as a human, because the dehumanizing doesn't stop because we're anti-racist. The dehumanizing stops when the moment that I choose to believe that the other is bad, the moment that I choose the dualism of the binary of good and bad, the moment that I label someone, you are just bad, then, I'm doing the exact same thing, just on the other end.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, it's a beautiful place to arrive at. And I recognize my own growth in that area, just recognizing some of these very basic, guttural, kind of physical, primal, maybe even we might say like responses. And, someone might message me and say, hey, when you said this in a story or whatever, I really didn't like it. You said this. It made me, I'm a disabled person, and that maybe felt a bit ableist. And my first response is going, I've got multiple disabled people in my family. Like I'm immediately like, my brain is like, I'm not ableist or whatever it is. And just learning to recognize anytime I try and defend myself, and anytime I've written a defense, I'm like, okay, and delete it. How can we actually engage this? But learning to go, oh, this is little Phil on the playground who's worried he's not going to fit in anymore. And he's scared, and he doesn't want to be alone, and he really wants people to like him. And just kind of stopping, hand on heart, just going, it's okay. You're safe. People want to connect. The reason this person's reaching out is because they actually want you to be connected and to connect with them. And there's a gap here, and we can close, just trying to like create that process. But I am aware that that's something that I've never naturally done. It's something I've picked up and learned along the way. I guess my question is, and I guess I'm asking this because I don't think this should be, this goes unsaid, this should not be your work. I think it's admirable and beautiful that this is your work, and I'm really impressed, and I think it's astonishing, and I think you are one of the best people out there in this world doing this work. But it shouldn't be your work to do. This should be like someone like me. This should be my work to be helping and educating and changing the white world to be a little bit more awake and aware and less white supremacist, bit less fragility, or at least be able to deal with their fragility. But I'm very conscious that this is something you've probably thought about a lot. So I'm going to ask for my benefit of how can I be a part of that, and also maybe how can I wake up a bit. You're not just dealing with people that are waking up and helping them, so it's not just me who's gone, oh, I've woken up a bit and I just want to educate myself. How can I do that? You're dealing with people that are just not. If there's a scale from completely asleep to completely awake, I don't know what that looks like, or where I am or where you are. All I know is that there are some people really far on the asleep stage. You're dealing with some of those people every day. And what are your thought processes on, how do I break in here? How do I find that scared boy? Because it must feel like occasionally you must go into a conversation going, this isn't going to go well. There's no way this is going to work. So do you sit and go, it's not worth my time? Or do you think, oh, maybe if I do it from this perspective, like what's your thought process in reaching what many of us would look at and go, that's unreachable, right? I'm thinking like me with my racist grandma. Where do I begin, right? This is someone that is, talk about systemic. This person is 70 years steeped into it, like they're systemically racist, right? If there's a systemic way to be racist, grandma is. What's going through your minds when you're thinking, okay, let's try and engage with this person?
There are so many different variables that I take into account. The first thing I ask myself is, how am I doing? Am I okay? If I don't feel safe, then I don't engage at all, which has happened, like an overt white supremacist engagement. I don't feel safe, and I don't owe that.
Yeah.
So if it's overt white supremacy or overt sexism, or I get a lot of sexual threats, like I'm done, I don't need to engage with that because I don't feel safe. That's it.
Yeah. And I guess that's the beauty of the opportunity for a white male. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but that's like, that should be something you can go, hey guys, this is not safe for me. Take over. I want some white males to jump into this white man's space and go, what the hell are you doing? You need to sort yourself out, or whatever. Sorry, please keep going.
If I don't feel safe, I just don't have to do it, because we don't owe these to anybody, right? However, if I do feel safe, and I want to engage, there are a few things that I ask myself, and I watch, the interaction. I watch, how is this person doing? And I point out, like, hey, you it sounds to me like you are upset. It sounds to me like you're triggered, activated. And if you are, perhaps we can just table these and come back later. So like watching the other all the time, recognizing if I am getting myself a rise too, and if I am trying to protect something that I don't need to protect, because if one of us is doing that, then the conversation is over. And it isn't always the other. Sometimes it's us too. So understanding that, am I othering this person? Am I dehumanizing them in my head? Understanding all of those dynamics. And then for sometimes, even if I'm feeling not super safe, but I love this person, I still stay in the engagement and I still try to have the conversation. But one thing that I wrote recently is I don't engage people to change their mind. The moment that we engage people to change their mind is the moment that we are treating them as a less than. That is supremacy in itself. My intent is not to change your mind. My intent is to show you how I experience what you've done. My intent is to see if you can, for just 1 second, see how I experience what you've done and what I've learned, and why my experience is important for you to understand, or why the experience of trans people, I'm not trans, but why the experience of trans people is important for you to understand when you're being transphobic. So my intent is just to say, hey, are you willing to see another side of this? Are you, I recognize and understand that though I know they are wrong and I know they are harming, not to them, they aren't. To them, especially when we're talking about, for instance, homosexuality, to them, they are saving the world from a perversion. And it's like, no, we have this conversation, because this is actually harming people. This belief is harming people. And can I explain to you how it is harming people? But all the time in the back of my head, I'm recognizing you are responding to your indoctrination. You are responding to the choices that were made for you. You are responding to your trauma. And that's why I talk so much about recognizing our privilege, because so I don't feel safe in conversations where my humanity is being denied. So I usually walk away from those conversations because I'm like, you're denying my humanity and this is traumatizing for me. But if you're talking about transphobia, that's not traumatizing for me because I'm not trans. Therefore, I have a responsibility to engage in that conversation for the sake of trans people. So I will stay in the conversation even after I want to check out, because it's boring and it's exhausting and I just don't want to do it. Yeah. But the humanity of somebody else is on stake. So I ask myself, is this a conversation that will benefit an identity group that I am not a part of? This is not re-traumatizing me. Therefore, I can engage in it. And making sure all the time that I am not. So I am very careful to not financially benefit, or my career doesn't benefit from having these conversations. These are conversations that I have one-on-one. It's discomfort that I have one-on-one. But at the end of the day, if anybody should be getting financial benefits from this work, should be trans people, right? So I can buy these books by trans people, learn from all these trans people. And if you have any questions, come back to me. Do not ask them. Don't re-traumatize them. Read their books, engage with their content, buy everything that they are putting out there. But when you have transphobic thoughts or questions, or you want to understand more, come to me for the sake of protecting, And I've talked about these, like understanding that we are shielding the communities that have less privilege in the world than us with our own privilege. Yeah. So what is the privilege that I have? And therefore, that allows me to shield the people that don't have that privilege. And we do that for one another, right? So the reason I continue to engage the Christian community is because as a Christian myself, whether I still identify as a Christian or not is kind of irrelevant, though I do. But I was a Christian for a long time, and I am still a Christian, though a very different type of Christian. And I was a pastor. So I feel like I have a responsibility. I feel like I have a responsibility to hold Christians accountable, especially pastors. Like I have the training. I went to school. I have the language. I am able to explain things in Greek and Hebrew. So I have a responsibility to stand up for those inside of churches that have less privilege than me as a pastor, that have less privilege than me as someone that has been theologically educated. So I don't do it to pick a fight with the pastors. I don't do it because I don't care. They have a lot of power. Mm-hmm. I do it for those they are harming. Because people ask me, how can you do these? I'm like, because I don't care about what all of these pastors that have privilege have to say about me or think about me. I don't care about them. I'm not doing it for them. All the time, I'm doing it for me at 19 years old and what I wish I could have read and what I wish I would have seen, what I wish I would have been able to be like, I hadn't even thought of that. And it's true. And I don't need to submit to these ridiculous, nonsense, traumatic beliefs. So all the time, these conversations, I'm thinking through who is the one that has the least amount of power, who is the one that has the least amount of privilege. And if I engage in this conversation, will they be benefited? So the benefit is for the ones with the least amount of privilege, not for the one I'm immediately engaging.
Yeah.
So all of those things are going through my head when I'm engaging. And that's why knowing if I feel safe or not matters a lot to me.
Yeah.
Because then I'm just being re-traumatized and nothing is worth being re-traumatized. Right?
No, sure. Yeah. I just like kind of sparked a thought in my head that I hadn't really thought about, but this week I've been finding my Facebook page, people that listen to this like are only on Facebook are going to be really heartbroken by this, but I hate my Facebook page. I hate the people that follow me on Facebook have been following me for like 12 years. And the majority of them are kind of conventional Christians that are maybe a bit edgy or a bit like fringe, but on the whole are still very much quite fundamental in their faith. And because of that, a lot of the stuff I post on Instagram just automatically goes over there. And once in a while, every few days, I open it up and I have a look. And just this week, it's just got to a tipping point where I feel I'm grieving as I read the comments. It's really hurting. It's really traumatizing me. And I don't know what that is overly because I've dealt with shit for a decade plus, and as far as dealing with Christians and pushing back on Christians. But it's really hurting. And I just checked today, I think it was, or maybe it was yesterday. And again, there's some horrible comments and stuff. Most of the horrible stuff is in private messages. And I know you know that. Because people will not, if you think what people post publicly is bad, wait till you see wait till you see our DMs, right? And I was just, the weight that came off my shoulder when I checked today and I looked at this horrible comment that someone had posted and I didn't even reply. I was like, you know what? He doesn't even deserve, like, this is doing too much internally with me and I need to go and figure out. And I just saw 4 or 5 people had come on and just like basically just put this person in their place going, like, who are you? Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, how dare you? Do you know Phil's heart? And I just was like, and I can't imagine what it's like for someone like a trans person who I can't even imagine the minority of people out there that are in their corner fighting for them. I can't even imagine, right? What it feels like to see yet another pastor say some horrendous thing and then see as they are scrolling through the comments, because we can't help it, right? We're drawn in and maybe we're hoping, maybe someone validates me or something, right? Maybe I have 1 like on Facebook. No, it's just awful comments or whatever it is. And yet to see Joe Luehmann got her gloves on and just came to town to fight your corner. Like, I can't imagine like how that feels. It must just feel like $1 million. Just that idea just sparked to me this tiny, pathetic, very privileged kind of example that I have in my week. But yeah, it must be huge.
Exactly, especially if you're not used to it. If you're used to, I have to fight all my fights because nobody stands in my corner ever.
Yeah.
And the least amount of privilege you have, the more that's your reality. So the more that somebody's saying like, no, I'm here and I will not tolerate this. The more that it allows for you. That's what I talk about. I talk about safety and how we are not going to be able to raise our collective consciousness and heal collectively until we are able to create spaces where people feel safe.
Yeah.
Because our body at a molecular level is not able to heal unless we feel safe. The least amount of privilege you have, the least amount of spaces where you're safe that you have. So we're talking about poor people, like I'm talking poor people below, the level of poverty in the world. I'm talking $1 a day people. They are never safe. So when we're like, oh, just, they just need to work harder. No, they are in cycles of trauma. And until we create safety for them, where they are not all the time thinking, where is my next meal going to come from? They are never going to be able to get out of the cycles of trauma. They are never going to be able to. And if you look at the stories of those, like very, very few that have been able to get out, it's because they found small spaces of safety. It's because somebody reached out and said, let me give you just a small little bit of safety. And then they allowed for them to heal enough to be able to move forward. So that's why pages like yours or like mine, it's not just social media. It's really not. We're talking about spaces of safety. We're talking about expanding the reach of safety so that collectively we can heal and collectively we can raise our consciousness and what I call move societally towards heaven on earth or liberation or whatever you want to call it. But if we are not moving towards ensuring that everyone feels safe, then those who don't feel safe will not be able to heal. That's why I know that so long as you stay inside of toxic churches, you're not going to heal. You're not. Your brain won't let you heal because your brain is protecting you. And your brain can only do two things. Your body can only do two things, protect you or heal. They cannot do, like your body cannot do those two things simultaneously. So long as your concern is protection, you will not be able to heal. Yeah. Imagine what that means for Black people, for Indigenous people. And I'm talking about not just healing of trauma. I'm talking also about healing, physical healing. The reason why you see so much sickness, specific types of sicknesses inside of Black communities or inside of Indigenous communities. And when we're talking about alcoholism inside of Indigenous communities, which a lot of it is also ridiculous, but we're talking about trauma that is just so hard to heal. We're talking about coping mechanisms, and we're talking about we are not moving the reach of safety for Indigenous communities so that they can heal. Because regardless, we are in a white supremacist state. So until we are able to move supremacy further away so that they have more space to breathe, we're going to keep seeing heart disease and cancer and alcoholism and drug addiction and and we're all poor people will continue to steal because they want to survive. They are trying to stay alive. Yeah. That's it. So we have to continue to change the conversations, right? What does it mean to ensure that there is safety for people? And in a small scale, you and I do that, right? Because we stand in corners of people that nobody has stood in before. And we open up space to be able to say, yeah, we're not going to center pastors here anymore. Pastors are not safe here. And that's okay. They don't need to be safe here.
Right. They've got plenty of space to be safe.
Exactly. They've been safe for far too long. But everybody that has been harmed by theology that is toxic and by pastors that push toxic theology is safe here. And I will protect your safety here. And that raises our collective healing, or at least it raises our availability to healing. So that's why I talk about the healing is a privilege. We don't get to look at people and be like, I mean, by now you should be over that. Get over it. Yeah. Like, no, healing is a privilege. And I recognize that privilege in me. Not only do I have enough finances, I'm poor by American standards, I'm poor, but I have enough finances to be able to buy books and take the time to read books because I have a husband, because I'm married and he could work while I was reading and studying and learning. I speak 2 languages, which changes a lot of things. I was telling this to someone. I know that even though I'm officially poor, my family isn't. And at the end of the day, if everything fails, I call my mom, fixes my problems. I know she would. I know she would show up. There are people that don't have that. That is levels of safety that I have that allow my healing. I know that if something happens, I can call my mother-in-law and she will help us with the kids. She will pay for the kids' things. And that changes everything. That allows for me to be able to heal in ways that other people don't have accessibility to healing. So I look at those who have a hard time healing more with how can I expand the reach of healing for you? What tools do you not have? How can we ensure that you have space for healing, that you can breathe, that you can rest, so that we can collectively move forward instead of, by now you should, somebody told me the problem inside of the church for you is that you didn't set boundaries. Like it's all on you. And I was like, for one, yes, but no, I wasn't taught how to set boundaries. I was taught that I had to work hard, not only as a woman, but also as an immigrant, that I had to prove my worth inside of this. And capitalism teaches us all that the harder you work, the more hours you put, the more emails you respond in the next, like in the 10 minutes that you receive it, the more text messages that you respond to, the more times that you say yes to things, the more that you get to advance in this system, even at the expense of your health. We are taught that resting is laziness. So sure, I could have set better boundaries, but nobody taught me to do that. No. They taught me that setting those boundaries was laziness and was wrong and was evil and was, all the things that I didn't want to be. So sure, you can go ahead and blame me, or we can talk about the system and how we can start celebrating and clapping for the things that are worth clapping. You're resting. That's awesome. Instead of you're going to take a sabbatical for that. I mean, if it's a pastor taking a sabbatical, we clap. But if it's somebody saying like, hey, I really don't want to serve in this church for the next 6 months, it's like, oof, your relationship with God is not okay. Instead of, awesome, you know your limits. And I celebrate you. That's super cool. I love that you are so self-aware that you know that you can't do this anymore. Right? We celebrate the wrong thing. No. And then we yell at people for responding to those celebrations.
Yeah. Man, that's huge. And it's something I mull that over a lot, like the level of privilege I have. I mean, I do this full time. Like it's such a, fine.
Here's about to die and I didn't plug it out.
Oh, no problem.
I just decided that my computer was going to be alive forever. Okay. I'm back.
No worries. You good? You powered up? I guess, So I guess the thing that fires me is I'm always aware of this. Like people come to me and I'm having slightly different conversations. I do talk with people often about things like race, but generally speaking, that's not someone that I'm known to be the person to go to with these questions. And that's probably a really good thing. And I want to talk about that on some level as well. But the level of privilege, people that go, well, you seem to have deconstructed so much. You seem to know so much about where you're at and what you believe. You seem to be very content with what you believe. Like I've been doing this for 3 years and I don't feel like I've moved forward that much. And I'm like, okay, but how many hours a day do you get to do this? Because I'm married. I have no kids. I realistically for the last 10 years have done this 12, 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. You know what I mean? I've put tens of thousands of hours into this and I'm very privileged to have done that. And I'm very thankful to have done that. And I don't think that's actually required either. And I think actually reading books is actually it's beautiful and helpful and whatever. But actually I think just going for a walk, taking a break from everything that's going on, that can be a huge step forward in deconstruction. That can be a huge step forward in decolonization as well. I think it's finding these spaces. It's giving peace to some trauma. It's giving some resolution to some trauma. It does feel, it feels like an urgency to it though, doesn't there? Like, I don't know. Well, maybe not always, but it feels like the people I'm talking to, there's an urgency behind it. There's I'm waking up to this issue and I want to fix it. I want to be on the other side of this. I want to get over my trauma. I want to get over, being racist and be able to say, no, I'm completely free from that. And I'm now anti-racist and that's a box I can tick, right? We arrived and I'm there. Or whatever it is, right? I want to get from here to here. There's that urgency. Like, what do you say to people like that when they're working 3 jobs and they've got 4 kids and they're a single dad or a mom or, that's a, hey, guess what? This isn't going to happen overnight conversation generally, right? I'm assuming maybe some people just, I don't know, but it seems rare.
It wasn't the case for me. And I still don't consider myself to have arrived. I think that it's that idea that we are told that you have to arrive, and you have to be the guru and the knowledgeable one. And I'm very of telling people I'm not the guru. I'm just the most knowledgeable thing I'm on. It's me. So that's all I can offer, really. But I think it's part of the white supremacist ideology that we're all indoctrinated into, that we have to be the experts, that we have to be the best one, that we have to be, instead of being able to see our life and ourselves as in process, always.
Yeah.
We're evolving, we're in process. And that's why I say I do consider myself a Christian today. And I give myself permission to change my mind tomorrow. And I don't have to have all the answers. There are things that I don't know yet, and that's okay. And today, I believe that when the Bible's talking about resurrection, we ought to read it as an awakening. And that's today, but I don't claim to be right about that or to have a final authority on what that is. So we have been indoctrinated into this belief that we have to have final truths and that everything has to be set and that everything has to be perfect. This obsession with perfection, even whether you're a perfectionist or not, the obsession with perfectionism and the obsession with appearing to be perfect is it's a default, like it's baked into white supremacist culture. So we don't want to appear as unfinished. It doesn't feel good to appear as unfinished, because if we are unfinished, then we are not acceptable. But we're all unfinished, we're all in process. So I think that giving people permission, because sometimes we feel like we need that permission when we come out of Christianity. I don't know why, but I mean, I do know why.
No.
We're told that we need permission, and telling people you don't need to have all the answers, and you don't have to, like, whatever you believe today can change again tomorrow when you have more information, and you will continue to change your mind. And tomorrow you can choose that, I think I'm an atheist, and that's totally fine. And then 3 years after that, be like, nope, agnostic. That doesn't mean that you were wrong. It doesn't mean that you were wrong when you chose to be an atheist. It means that you were faithful to who you were when you needed to be an atheist, but it doesn't serve you anymore. And that's fair, and that's okay. But this fear with changing our mind as though it is an indicator that we are wrong. But instead, it is an indicator that we have more information now. And information, I'm not talking about books like you were saying. I'm talking about we have more information about us and others. We have more information about who we are. We're able to know more about ourselves and about others. And that information changes the way in which we present ourselves. So there is sculpture that my mother-in-law bought for me. She was at an art thing, and she saw this sculpture, and she said, this sculpture made me think of you. Like, I had to buy it. It's you. So when she dies, it's mine. That's what she said. So it's a woman, and she's standing with a chisel in her hand. That's a hard word for me to say. And she has a hammer in the other hand, and she, waist down, she's inside a block of cement, and she's chiseling her way out of the cement. And you can see scars, in her body. She's like a wire person. It's weird, but it's beautiful. She can see holes and scars in her body. That's what I think deconstruction is. It's chiseling our way. That's what I think. Not only what I think deconstruction is, that's what I think salvation is too. It's chiseling our way out of the boxes of the indoctrination of the social conditioning, so that we can become the one that we were always meant to be. And at the beginning, we can only move a hand and a finger, and we can only start by blinking. But eventually we get more mobility, and we get more mobility. So after 12 years for you of doing this full time, having conversations and engaging, you're probably moving your toes right now. But some people
I hope so. I don't know. Maybe I'm just neck up. I don't know. But it feels like every time I think I'm finished, there's a whole bunch more. But
but there is people that are just are just starting to blink. And recognizing where we are, and recognizing that this is a process and it's going to be a journey, is important, and giving ourselves permission to be like, I'm totally unfinished, and that's completely fine. And I will change my mind tomorrow, and that's completely fine. Somebody DM'd me and said that I gave them hope for Christianity. They said, I don't consider myself a Christian anymore, but sometimes I wish I could, because there are so many things about Christianity that I love. And you give me hope that maybe one day I can become a Christian. I was like, you don't have to. You can just grab whatever you want from Christianity that you love and continue to be an atheist. You can do whatever the hell you want. There are no rules anymore. We belong to ourselves. We are our own person. And we have, the only thing that we owe to anything is to be faithful to who we were created to be and who we are. So you can be an atheist that holds to some Christian beliefs. You can be whatever you want. There are no rules anymore. And we had this exchange, and they were saying, like, I had never considered that I really do not need permission from Christians to be able to hold to some Christian tenets that serve me and still do serve me. So wherever you are is where you are. It's not wrong. It's not right. It's not too slow. It's not, it's not that you haven't evolved fast enough. It's just that you are who you are, and your journey is unique, and you're not supposed to be anywhere else but where you are. So, embrace you. That's it. We don't owe anybody anything. We embrace ourselves, and we learn to accept ourselves and, belong. I love Brené Brown talks about this a lot, about the belonging to yourself and she talks about how she had to struggle with this because she read, I believe it was a Maya Angelou quote, but I don't remember exactly, where she was talking about, unless we belong to ourselves, we don't belong anywhere.
Yes.
And Brené was like, what? Like, that goes against everything, because we need to belong to one another, right? And then recognizing, in the book, she talks about, it's Braving the Wilderness, the book that she talks about this. She talks about how when she recognized that was true, unless we belong to ourselves so deeply that belonging to others doesn't remove our own safety, belonging or not belonging to others does not affect our own safety until we get there. We really don't belong to anybody. What belongs is the image others have of us. And so far as we're trying to protect that image over not betraying our own selves, we are unhealed people that are going to, that are harming. You're betraying your own self. You're harming yourself. So the journey is to learn to belong to ourselves. And it's a long journey.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, it makes me think of, we talked earlier about someone sends me a message and is like, you did something that's ableist or racist or whatever. And I'm immediately, oh no. And it attacks the narrative, the story I'm telling about myself that, oh, I'm not anymore. I've arrived, or I never was, or whatever it is. But it's the thing of when you start to realize that your response can be, oh, of course I'm racist occasionally. Of course. This is a, chiseled out mess so far, I've barely got an arm out and I'm flapping around trying to do stuff with it, that's about it right now. So of course I screw up occasionally. Of course I'm not going to get this perfectly. That's an okay response. The weight suddenly off the shoulders to go, oh, I don't have to have it down. I don't have to arrive. I think I posted on Instagram this week about the concept of backsliding to Christians, right? For a Christian, you're out and then you arrive in, and it's not this progressive journey. So any movement beyond in is back out. You're out again. And so there is this fear of momentum, of change, of growth. There's a fear of chiseling anything out. We have set in stone what's allowed, and we're not going to get a chisel out anytime soon. We're stuck with this. It's really tough because I guess I think about this year, I've been so much more intentional about working with inherent sexism and racism that I just did not know that was still so deeply rooted. And that's been some heavy chiseling. And I got some scars from those chisels. I slipped and missed a fair few times, I think. Or maybe I was just really closely attached to some of the bits of rock that had to go. I don't know. And I guess I want to ask you, we talk about using privilege, and I'm very conscious that I'm privileged on so many levels. It's ridiculous. And I'm, it is what it is. I didn't choose to be who I am, but I am who I am, and I have to be aware of that. So, but I do think, okay, you can step in for a trans person. I can step in for a trans person and a person of color, indigenous, black, whatever. I'm white. I'm at the top of that, societally structured totem pole. I'm right at the top, and I have the privilege. So I can be a person that steps in. But one of the things I was aware of whilst doing this work, and I had thought I'd done a lot of work already, and maybe I had compared to some, but it's not about comparing yourself with others. It's about doing the work for you, is realizing this is hard. This is exhausting. I probably spent about 2 months really depressed until he was like, what is going on with you? And I'm like, I do not know, but I feel like literally just shit day in, day out. I wake up feeling like shit. I feel like I wade through a 6 foot, sea of treacle. I'm wading through my day. I go to bed going, I feel pretty crap. Go to sleep, wake up, still feel crap. But 2 months straight. And it was about 2 months in, I was like, it's because I'm just relentlessly, non-stop, like listening to 18-hour audiobooks in like one day on race or, whatever. I am non-stop. I'm kind of pausing my podcast. I'm putting out half as many podcasts. I'm really trying to focus and go, let me try and do this work. That just floored me. I didn't have space. I wasn't even really in the place to be helping people in that month or two. Like I just, I just wasn't there. And I guess what I'm aware of is I've tried to find more balance to that, and I may have swung too far in a pendulum, and maybe I need to find a bit better balance. But one of the things I'm aware of is, how do we use that privilege when we still have so much work to do? I think of, you posted recently about an interaction you had, and I saw that interaction. I saw a post that someone had said about, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something to do with Thanksgiving, and we don't need to get political over dinner or whatever. And I was like, God, that's a privileged position. What does that look like for, I don't know, a whole host of different people? And I was about to comment, and I was like, I don't even know how to word this, but I'm going to say something. And then I saw you'd posted on it, and I was like, Joe's got it. Like, she's going to say this 1,000 times better than me. But hearing you talk there about the experience of maybe a trans person or something, I rethink that interaction, and I go, Phil, was that the right response? Was it the right response to go, well, here's the expert? Or was the right response to even say, look, I don't even know how to word this, but Joe is on it. I agree with Joe here. I think there's something here. And I think as a white person, I recognize this in myself at times. And I have learned this. Like, it's really hard for me to find that balance where I don't want to be stepping in going, hi, here's the white guy to save you and tell you how wrong you are, when I don't even know. I'm not an expert. I've not done enough work to be on any level an expert on this level. But at the same time, to be going, I could be pulling some of this weight that other people don't need to be pulling. Can you talk to that of like how, because I'm sure it maybe in certain areas you are the expert, and in other areas maybe you're not, but you still relentlessly dive in. I've seen you relentlessly dive in and fight corners in every area of life, and I'm like, oh my God, Joe, I don't even know how you do it. You're like the Energizer Bunny on Instagram. But yeah, talk me through, like, how should I be navigating some of these things? And people listening, I'm sure, are thinking this stuff too. I'm sure I'm not alone.
You touched on so many things. I was actually taking notes.
Okay, sorry, I ramble, so we can bit by bit.
Right. I'm taking notes because it's important what you're talking about. You're talking about the depression of submerging yourself into the white supremacist world, and seeing the white supremacist world no longer from Phil's eyes, but now from the eyes of those who are not privileged inside of white supremacy. So listening to books by Ta-Nehisi Coates, or listening, like some of these books, it takes me months to read Ta-Nehisi Coates' words because of the trauma that I can feel it. I cry. I have to stop. It breaks me. It just breaks me. Same when I read history, and I read a lot of history, and I have to stop, and it just absolutely breaks me. I recognize that I am experiencing trauma, and it's very emotional, and my body is responding to that, and it should. And I need to rest sometimes too. And then I also think of those who don't have the ability to just stop the book. Well,
I think I kept pushing myself in this season. I remember saying to my wife, this is a privileged thing for me to go, oh, poor me, I'm getting upset reading about slavery. I'm like, I am of course I'm not, but I am the oppressor. I am the person that's certainly living off the backs of that. And so I'm like, what is it for, if nothing else, this almost felt, and I had to catch myself, almost a sycophant kind of like thing in my head of like, well, if the black person does this every second of every day, when they're scared of police brutality, when they are not afforded the opportunity to educate to the same degree, when they are not given the same opportunities in employment, like I'm like, the least I can be doing is doing this brutal work to educate. Like, how dare I say, there was a thing but I processed that to some degree a bit, but I'm so aware it's such a privileged thing. I can't even imagine what it is to do the same work. Yeah.
But the work is to be aware that you are in a privileged position. The work is not, so I'm going to say something uncomfortable. Get ready.
Please.
Part of the reason why we want to read it all and consume it all and fix it all is white saviorism. It's 100% white saviorism. It's this desire to become the savior, which continues to be white supremacy within. So
Yeah.
we don't have to know all the things. We don't have to understand all the things. And we certainly don't have to consume everything in a way that it just destroys us too, because then we are not helpful, right? And I say this often, if we are not enjoying our life, and I say this comprehending and understanding that I have the privilege to say this. This is not easy for everyone. However, if you are privileged enough to be able to enjoy your life and we are not enjoying your life, then oppression wins again. Especially for those of us who walked away from the oppressive system that is inside of toxic churches, where we weren't enjoying life because we were told we couldn't enjoy life, because joy, unless it's the fake joy of Christianity, right, joy is seen as sinful. So there is a resistance. It is resistance to enjoy our life too. It is resistance to rest. It is resistance to laugh. It is resistance to have some drinks with our friends and get tipsy and laugh and be silly. There is resistance in dancing. There is resistance in going out. There is resistance in flirting. I flirt. I love flirting now because I feel that I am resisting white supremacist notions of what I am supposed to be as a wife. And I don't do it like in a way that I'm leading somebody on, like it's silly flirting. That means nothing.
To enjoy being playful and
Yes, just being playful. The things that I didn't get to do when I was supposed to do.
Right. Yeah.
And like saying, you don't get to steal that from me. You just don't get to steal that from me. So recognizing our privilege doesn't mean that we want it to go away. It means that we use it, right? So if we submerge ourselves so much into this trauma that we end up depressed, and it really, the only function of that is that we feel like we are white saviors. Like, look at me, I'm also sad. And it's not a conscious process.
I recognized it. I was genuinely, that's why I was saying, like, it got like kind of this sycophant, weird, like, look at me, I can somehow go through, or I can empathize with this on a some level. And I was like, this is just really fucked up. And I'm like, what is that? And,
right. I am so good that I am even wanting to feel your pain and whatever the cost, even at the cost of my own healing. That's completely white saviorism within us too. And so recognizing that, okay, I don't need to do that. The best thing that I can do for the movement of liberation for all of us is to be the healthiest version of myself. And that includes sometimes stepping away, not forever, but sometimes stepping away and being like, I cannot engage with that. So sometimes people ask me like, why haven't you talked about these? I'm like, because I don't want to. We don't have to talk about every topic. We don't have to address injustice. We don't have to read about because if we do, we're killing ourselves too. And then oppression wins yet again. So there is resistance in also saying, I want joy in my life and I will find ways to have it. And I will, at the same time, we can do both, fight so that everyone else can have joy too. So we can do both. And I recognize when I am, because it happens to me too, Phil, where there are, and my husband is the one that recognizes it before me. I'm sure that it happens with your wife too.
My wife is on it.
Okay. Yeah. He's like, you're not okay. And I need you to step away. If he doesn't make me or anything like that, but he's like, I need you to consider how maybe you need to step away right now. Because it feels like you're not okay. Like this is really, so it happened for when in the summer, I had this tweet thing that went viral in the worst possible way. With just, extremist white supremacist Christians. And I woke up one day to thousands of messages, both DMs and mentions, and reading them was a lot, just a lot. And so I tried to reply to everybody. I was trying to get back, and then I made actual replies to the things that they were saying, like actual elaborate theological replies. So it was 6 theological replies to all of these things to explain, like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I choose to believe the things I believe because I've actually done the work. And I don't do this for you. I do it for those of us who've been told we don't get to believe that we can be Christians and also be gay or, accept gay people or whatever. So, but after a few weeks of that, you could physically see me, I was affected by all of this, but I wanted to keep fighting because I was fighting white supremacy inside of me. And a lot of that is the white savior that we all have inside of us, regardless of our skin color. We all want to save the world, and we all have this, we've all been given this narrative, which is very, very prevalent in Christianity, of the hero. And we all want to be the hero, right? Because Jesus was the hero. Now we're little Jesuses who are heroes too. The heroes don't exist. We are all our own hero. The only hero that exists in your own life is you. And we all make good decisions and bad decisions. And we are all the villain of somebody's story. And we're all the hero of somebody's story. And we're just nuanced and complex and deep. And our lives are long enough that we can do harm and bring joy to people. And recognizing all of that is important. So I'll be the villain to the right people, at least, we try to be the villain to I'll be the villain to every evangelical pastor. I'm happy to be their villain, but I had to step away. So I took a couple of weeks that I was like, I'm not going to reply, and I'm not going to engage, and and I want to spend time with spending time with my kids is probably what brings me the most joy. I want to spend time with them. And we went to the beach a lot for a couple of weeks. We just went to the beach a lot. And it doesn't mean that I put my baton down. It doesn't mean that I stopped fighting. It meant that this is not, this is a lifelong fight. This is a lifelong battle. Yeah. And part of the battle is enjoying our lives too. Yeah. If we're not, I remind myself all the time, if you're not enjoying your life, you lost the battle. Regardless of how much you move, you progress the movement, you lost the battle. So it doesn't matter that I move the movement so much. I mean, it matters for my descendants, I guess. But for me, it doesn't matter if the battle is lost within me, if it's, and then I'm a traumatized person that harms others. I don't show up for my family. I don't show up for my kids. I don't show up for the people in my life. And, that's important. So, I talked about joy and rest and not being able to walk away from trauma. And then the emotional labor that we don't recognize sometimes that goes into our work too. So recognizing that a lot of our work is emotional work. It's very intense, emotional, exhausting work. Yep. And that, we may not be going to an office and doing a lot of very tangible things, but our body is recognizing the amount of labor that is put into the work that we are putting. And if we don't learn to recognize when, our body's saying like, hey, you need to just take a break, then we are no different, right? Trying to prove something. Right. No, inside of Christianity, we were trying to prove that we were worth God's love, that we were worth God's approval, and that was, meaning the church's approval and leaders' approval and our parents' approval. It was God's approval. Well, now we're doing the same thing, but we're looking for the approval of the marginalized. And we actually don't need their approval. They don't have to give us their approval. They don't even have to clap for us at all. What we need to do is be faithful to who we are and move the world towards heaven on earth. And that includes my personal work moves towards heaven on earth. Both my personal and collective together. It's both and it's not selfish to take time to move my personal word. Sometimes it's not selfish. It's right. It's appropriate.
That's incredible. That's really, really good. It's really helpful. I'm hoping other people, it's helped me a lot. Hoping other people listening along going, okay, yes, I can see that. I can definitely. And I have no doubt a lot of people fall into these traps as well.
See, indoctrination doesn't go away because you dismantle, you can leave Christianity away, but if you are not dismantling the systems of oppression that are baked into it, you will continue to play up to them, So I see a lot of atheists, for instance, that are trying to save Christians out of Christianity. That's Christianity. Yeah. It's the same thing with a different name. Because nobody needs to be saved from anything, What we need is better tools. Yeah. So what tools do you have?
It's still a fundamental in-out dualistic kind of way of seeing everything. And you see this again and again. I think this is where, I was talking about this with someone the other day. I can't remember who, but what I see very early on, people that deconstruct are coming out of these radically dualistic structures like church. Fundamental church has in-out authority figure, gives you the kind of parameters. You tick the boxes, you're safe. If you don't, you're out there and you're going to burn in hell at some point. You come out of that and you start to deconstruct. You're learning a bit of autonomy, but what are you looking for really? You're looking for a new pastor. You're looking for a new guru. You're looking for a new whatever. And the danger is for people like you and me, is it's really easy to be that without even trying. It's really easy to be a person that people go to and go, oh, well, what does Joe say? If she says it, that's fine. I can just tick all those boxes. I can do that and I'll be fine. And we're not actually helping people in a sense on some level. Of course, it can be really helpful to educate people and help move them forward in life. And,
but not to
I guess
the problem is when we're wanting to create dependency. So I don't want anybody to depend on me. I want people to actually, I told my husband one day, like, it's funny because my job is to give enough tools to people so that I run myself out of a job.
Yeah.
Like my job doesn't need to exist anymore. So I don't exist anymore. I don't need to exist anymore. That's my job. My job is to run myself out of a job, to not have a job. Yeah. Because I don't want to create dependency for people, like you don't need to hear my opinion on anything. Could my opinion be helpful in your journey as I give tools to you? Yeah, sure. And recognizing that, like I'm just borrowing a tool from Joe, but eventually I won't need it. I have my own tools and those are going to be great.
That's exciting.
It's so exciting, right? Yeah. I want people to stop following me because they are like, nothing that she says, I don't care about anything that she says anymore. Like I know everything that she's saying. Nothing is new for me. She's not serving me anymore. And I want that to happen. I want to clap for that. Because I don't want to create dependency. I don't want people to keep coming. I want to be a tool in your journey. And then you're moving on and doing your own thing. And you won't remember my name. And that's completely acceptable and great. And that's what we're hoping for. But if we're creating brands here, if we're creating brands, we're creating churches. Yeah. It's so different. Yeah. We're creating churches and not sharing tools with people. Yeah. So, and the different, and this requires for us to step outside of capitalistic mentalities, right? Because I need to pay my bills too. All of us. So in a way, I'm creating a brand because I need you to pay into the brand so that I can actually pay my bills. And then at the same time, I need to reject the brand so that we are stepping away from capitalism and so that we are stepping away from white supremacy. And you don't make of me an idol anymore. Yeah. We have to, work inside of a messed up system, resisting the system, but trying to survive it at the same time. And it's messy and complicated. And that's why, I think you do it too. We share all the things that we share for free, and we invite people to partner with us, but it's not mandatory. Like nothing that I do is behind a paywall, really. Conversations I get, like if people want to have a one-on-one with me, then I don't demand it, but I ask them, like, if you could partner with me and my time, that would be great. But I don't demand it, of course. But nothing that I do is behind a paywall as a way to resist white supremacy and capitalist mentality. And at the same time, I'm trying to raise our awareness enough to recognize, but if you don't partner with me financially, I can't keep doing my work either. Yeah. That's it. And that's you too. Yeah, so absolutely. It's like, you're not trying to benefit from your trauma, but at the same mentality time, is... Yeah, well, the people I'm working with, most of the people, there's a big overlap in people we work with. They have spent enough time with leaders trying to get money out of them, right? That is they do not need a new leader to look to, whatever, calling ourselves leaders. I don't mean to try and elevate or whatever, but someone that is a stepping stone for them that is helping them move forward. They don't need that person then going, gotcha, you need to buy my book, or here's my conference you have to go to, or here's my Zoom call that costs $3,000, or, that we've done that. We have done that for decades, most of us. Please do not give me that again, because it's just going to give you that sinking feeling of I know this, I don't trust it, I don't, that's the last thing that people need. And yet what's amazing is I've never charged for anything for 12 years. I traveled and spoke around the world, paying for my own airfare, hotels, travel, everything, refusing when people said, what do you require from us? I says, I don't require anything, but I have no income. If you want to respond, by all means. And I've flown to America, done 2 weeks of trips and come back with nothing. And that hurt. That hurt the bank big time. But then I've popped to a local church that doesn't even really know me and said, oh, could you come and help us for a leaders afternoon or something? And they've given me $3,000. And I'm that's the most I've ever been given in my life. And I'm holy crap, that's
significant percentage of my yearly income in just one like afternoon for an hour. And you go, it all works out. People are generous. People on the whole, and people aren't able to give. Well, they would never have had someone fly to them, talk to them, spend time with them. None of these people would have gone and done that, generally speaking. It requires someone like me and you to go, no, here I am. I'm here. I'm talking to someone the other day who's suicidal. Like, and I'm like, Jesus, this is not my remit. I'm like, trying to point her to different resources I know of and help. And she's like, I really want to find a counselor. I'm like, that is like my number one advice. You know, sit down with someone in therapy. So I can't find a single one I can afford. And I'm just like, this sucks.
Accessibility healing is not widespread. It's just not widespread. So that's the job, right?
And who's least likely to be able to make money to pay for therapy? Someone that is so depressed, so suicidal that they can't hold a job. Like, okay, where are they paying for? Right. It's just not going to happen.
The most traumatized are the ones that have the least accessibility, which upside down, like the system is upside down. And that's the system. So a way to not play the system is do what you and I do. It's like, no, I'm here, I'm available, and I'll do it. And I'm just hoping it all works out at the end of the year. You know,
we're getting close, Joe. It's like, you know, like you got a couple of weeks here for the end of the year. Oh, I love it.
That's why I don't. I had to apply for. I had to apply for food stamps at one point. Soon after we left the church, we were like, you know, my entire resume was gone. I mean, I had no personal, like nobody could. I could be like, can I put you in my resume so people can call you nobody? I had nobody. No job references, no personal references, really. I mean, nothing. And same with my husband. We were both like, we have nothing. We have resumes that are useless. And we are in our 30s, early 30s, and we have kids. And it looks like we are going to just figure out, you know, what we're going to do. So I would wake up at 4 a.m. and go do Uber till about 10, and then I'd come home and I'd take the kids and we would do lunch and take care of things, and then my husband would leave around 5 p.m. and work till about 3 a.m. And I did that for months, but it wasn't enough. Like Uber doesn't make enough.
Of course.
So it wasn't enough. So I was like, well, I think that we can apply to food stamps. And there was the amount of shame for applying to food stamps and feeling like I had failed, even though I did everything right. You know, I was working 60 hours a week at the church. He was working 80 hours a week. They didn't give us insurance. They didn't give us enough money. I was getting paid $700 a month. So we didn't have savings. We didn't have anything. The church told us to leave everything for the church. So we did. We literally left everything, sold things. Like we had a house in Vegas and we didn't have it anymore. So recognizing, you know, first I felt so much shame. And then I recognized, like, why do I have to feel shame? The system failed me. I didn't fail. I didn't fail. And I have nothing to be ashamed of. I want the food stamps. I should get the food stamps. And I'm not a failure. And I shouldn't be embarrassed for getting the food stamps. Yeah. The system failed me. It just failed me. And even if you didn't do all the right things, but you are so traumatized by the system that you cannot hold a job or whatever it is, you know, like you hate every job that you get into because most jobs are abusive, especially at the $10 an hour level. You're not failing and you're not a failure. The system is failing you. Yeah. So get the food stamps and get the medical that we don't even have in America or in the US. Yeah. And there is no shame in any of that. You know, the system is the one failing us. We are not the ones failing. We're absolutely not. And changing that framework in my head and allowing myself to not feel shame and guilt for something that I didn't ought to feel shame and guilt. You know, like it is what it is. I find myself in this situation and I'm doing the best I can with the tools I have and the accessibility to resources that I have. I'm generally doing the best I can. Yeah. And I believe that's true for most all people. They are doing the best they can. For most all marginalized people, let me rephrase that. They are doing the best they can with the tools they have and the accessibility to resources that they have. They are absolutely doing the best they can. Yeah. So now, if you have privilege and you're choosing not to do better and you're choosing not to go to therapy and you're choosing not, then that's a choice. That's different, you know? But I'm talking about here, marginalized people, that's different. If the Queen of England chooses not to go to the doctor and, you know, get health checkups, then she'd be dead. But if somebody who doesn't have insurance, and in the US at least it would cost them hundreds and hundreds of dollars to go, chooses not to go because they'd rather feed their kids, they didn't fail. They had no choice. The system failed them.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about and why
I forgot as well. I literally just, as you paused it, like, I'm like, where did we start with that? That was so good. I don't even know. We had so many places. I mean, talking of system failing though, I mean, like, it's heartbreaking to see, those affected by the system end up so affected by the system that they end up fighting against changes to it. Like, I guess one of the things I've noticed is, I remember back in the day when I was a bit more of a fundamental Christian, I was a bit black and white. I went on this like tour, spoke in churches all over, America and Europe, talking about women should be speaking from the church. Very ironic, I know, because I'm a guy, but these churches wouldn't let a woman come and speak about that. So I was like, well, I'll come and I'll try and like, bring a bit of change, give some good theological insight as to why women could teach and all this different stuff. And it struck me about 4 or 5 churches in. I was like, what is going on? Where every church got pissed off. There was enough pissed off people lined up to ask for prayer at the end. They didn't want prayer. They just wanted to give me a good, like, telling off. It was consistently all the women telling me that wasn't true. It wasn't the men. Now, the men, I did speak to plenty of men that didn't like it as well, but I was so blown away. I was like, and this is definitely white saviorism kicking in on like a whole nother level of like, but I'm here to like give you a voice, right? I mean, what is that, right? But on some level, I'm like, what is happening? And I got upset, but I think of, people that voted for Trump last time, and you look at the reasons they have and all sorts of different things. There's all sorts of different dynamics in there, and I'm not too black and white. I cannot say that someone that votes for Trump is an evil or bad person. We don't know the story they have where they're going, actually, how do I feed my kids if I vote Hillary will starve to death? I mean, absolutely ridiculous, but that's their story. But generally speaking, a huge portion of people that supported Trump were massively affected negatively by Trump, and have consistently been massively affected negatively by voting Republican. Now, I'm not saying Republican bad, Democrat good. Again, there's probably good components to both, bad components to both. But it feels like there's something about us being able to buy into, and you mentioned this, even a person of color can have white supremacy, can have these kind of components, but in like, what is that? How do we protect ourselves from these systems? Like, how do we recognize these systems in ourselves? I mean, it's so huge. But
heartbreaking, like seeing someone marginalized that has internalized the oppression, and so they uphold it. It's the Candace Owens, right? The me inside of Christian white supremacist churches. It's the women that you are talking to that hold up patriarchy. And all of that is for somebody actually asked me recently about what I thought about Candace Owens and why I never say anything about her. I'm like, what am I supposed to say? Like, until I've held every white person accountable, I'm not going to hold a black woman for trying to survive white supremacy by cozying up to it. But it's a coping mechanism. She's trying to survive. That's all she's doing. And that's what women that are upholding patriarchy are trying to do too. They are trying to survive patriarchy by upholding it, because they think if I cozy up to patriarchy, and obviously all of this is not conscious again, but if I cozy up to patriarchy and I uphold it, then the patriarchs will protect me. That's not true at all. It's the same with white supremacy. If I cozy up to the white supremacists in power, then when it comes to it, white supremacy will protect me. Nope, it will not. It's built to destroy you. That's it. But it's a coping mechanism, and it's a valid coping mechanism. So I will not hold the Candace Owens accountable for trying to survive a system in the way that she can survive it, in the way that she, it's in the way that she can cope with the tools that she's been given, with the knowledge she's been given. I won't hold her accountable until I actually hold the people accountable that are benefiting from the system for real, like really benefiting from this. So I'm not going to hold her accountable before I hold Trump and every other white, cis, hetero man accountable first, So, but I see a lot of people that because of our biases want to jump on the marginalized identity because, of course, Candace Owens gets a lot of attention. because she's a Black woman. They are tokenizing her. They are tokenizing her to be able to say, see, we're not racist. We are not patriarchal. We are not sexist. Like, look at this Black woman that supports us. So, of course, she gets attention. But before you want to run and attack Candace Owens, I want to see you hold every single white male pastor that has supported Trump vocally, verbally, and overtly accountable. And I don't see that. I don't see enough people holding the white wealthy pastors accountable as I see the ones jumping for Candace Owens' throat. You know, I leave Candace Owens alone. For the most part, Black people get her. Like, they hold her accountable, and it is their place. That's not our lane. It's just not our lane.
Yeah.
So I focus on the ones that have more power than me, societally speaking, and not less power than me. And that's nuanced, right? Because Candace Owens officially has kind of more power than me. But societally, she's a Black woman, and I am not. I am a brown woman. And I need to recognize that. And it is not my place to hold her accountable. So you're a man. It is not your place to hold women accountable for patriarchal, that you're trying to survive. But it is your place to hold every single man accountable, you know, for patriarchal sentiments, for sexism, like, absolutely. So recognizing those dynamics too, and recognizing, like, that's not my place, and I'm going to stay on my lane. Absolutely going to stay on my lane.
That's really interesting.
And Islamophobia, for instance, people all the time, like, Christians are the most Islamophobic people I've ever met. And they, every time I say Christianity is bad, they go, but what about Muslims?
Right.
Muslims are taking care of their own.
Yeah.
One. And two, Christianity continues to be the majority, religious adjacency in the West. So we're going to focus on the ones that have the most power and not the ones that have the least power right now. And Muslims don't have the least power, but don't have a lot of power compared to Christians in the West.
In a random city in America, you're not generally thinking, oh, Muslims are pulling all the strings here and running everything. And if you're not a Muslim, you're suffering. You know, like, that's not a conversation that's happening anywhere in America.
No. So if you want to, like, and Muslims are taking care of their own. They hold their own accountable. You know, like, Black people hold their own accountable. Like, I am very intentional about holding Latin Americans accountable. So we're holding our own accountable. Women are very good at holding our own accountable. We got it. But if you're so quick to want to hold marginalized identities accountable, then you're running into a lane that is not yours. You know, like, what's your lane? What is your privilege? And then you call your own to account. That's your lane. Stay on your lane. And it's hard sometimes, because there are times that I'm like, I seriously wish I could. And it's a rule that I imposed on myself. Nobody told me to. But sometimes I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have imposed that rule, because I really have a lot to say about what Candace Owens, you know, like, I have so much to say. But then, sure enough, what she's saying is being, like, she's just repeating a lot of white supremacist nonsense. So there's always a pastor, there's always a politician that is saying it too. And that's my focus. That's where I go.
Yeah, that's so good. I can't remember that time in my life very well. I look back and I'm like, I feel like I was maybe self-aware enough not to observe, but not to act on that in any particular. I think there was plenty of men. I spent all my time usually with men in, you know, the pastors' meetings and things like that in between meetings and stuff anyway. So they were all men laced, and especially in these churches, right? So there's plenty of those conversations, but I do recognize that. I think I've messaged you quite a while back now. Because my friend was constantly sending me messages of a black friend of his who was constantly going, oh, I don't know what Black Lives Matter is about, and it's this and this and this. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, here's a black person that my friend is constantly going, look. He's wanting me to comment. And I'm like, how do I even begin? And we had this conversation, and you said basically the same thing. And I think it's really helpful, because I have noticed in me still lingering traces of racism when I see that going on. And it is, it might not be exclusively a racist, component. There might be other components in there, but there's a whole bunch of components there where I immediately start dehumanizing this person. We do it with so many people, but I'm like, oh, so in my crusades to elevate a person of color, whatever the race, to a level playing field with me, a white person, I see someone that's saying a different message who is a person of color, and I immediately dehumanize them. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm playing like 4D chess here. Like, what am I doing? You know, I'm like, this is insane. And
That's a great definition. This
yeah.
is 4D chess at this point. This is not, my brain can't.
It's wild, but I do think it's important to talk about that stuff because I think we are so quick to do that. We're so quick to jump to our whateverisms. We're so quick to jump to our, our exceptions and focus on some random little bunny hole rather than our whole world that is full of an issue that we can be dealing with. And I think it's huge, like going back to this concept of being swallowed up by systems. But I think of, capitalism is a great example as well of people that are not benefiting from capitalism. Capitalism is getting worse. People are getting to the point where they are benefiting less from capitalism as time goes on. There's more people using food banks. There's more people under the, lots of people's income are going up, but the comparative is massive. And what that equates to, the buying power, the ability to have a home, the whatever. And you look at these things, and yet, again, I see people that are foot on the neck, never managing to climb the social rung, fighting tooth and nail for a capitalistic society, for whatever, they are pulling themselves up their bootstraps. I know far too many people that would push that narrative a lot, and they're not millionaires, right? They're not, billionaires or any of that. They're lucky if they're making 20 grand, 30 grand a year. And it shows this capacity for ourselves to blind ourselves from that concept. And again, it goes right back to the first question I asked. It's like, how do we wake up? How do we do this? How are we elevating society? Because it feels like we're getting less able to have nuanced conversations. It feels like that whether it's our methods of communication, social media, it seems to be pushing more extreme conversation, rather than the kind of conversation that wakes us up. Like, do you have thoughts on that? Do you have thoughts on where we're heading? If social media is the right place to be having these conversations, what kind of changes needs to occur? Like, what do you see going on in general?
I think I think actually social media is giving, it's a double-edged sword, if you will. Mm-hmm. It pushes capitalism really well, and it pushes notions of white supremacy really well too. You're constantly comparing, like you have the capacity to be constantly comparing yourself. I'm thinking, I was watching, they tell you like what to watch now on Instagram a lot. Yeah. And there was this video of a girl who had thin lips, and I have kind of thin lips, and she was making them thicker. And my thought was like, this is ridiculous. This is the crap that we put online. Like, make your lips thicker, as though lips are inherently wrong. Lips thicker or thinner. Like, we cannot move from thin lips are the best and thick lips are wrong to thick lips are good. And like, we cannot keep doing this binary thing. We have to move on that. But at the same time, social media is giving us accessibility to the other. So I would have never been able to sit down to learn from a trans person before, because I didn't know where to find a trans person. You cannot, like, as soon as you leave evangelicalism or, toxic Christianity, you don't know where you're going to make friends with a trans person. Like, how? Where do you go? But social media allowed that for me. It allowed me to go into spaces of trans people, especially trans people for me. And to just sit and listen and learn from them. And that accessibility to the other allowed for me to stop dehumanizing them in the ways that I had been conditioned to dehumanize them. No longer could I continue to tell the story that, well, they are this or they are bad or they not. I couldn't, because now I saw him. I saw her. I was listening to them. I couldn't. I would have been lying as I was listening and learning from them and hearing their stories. It was no longer this person that I created in my head. So that accessibility to the other, I think it's an excellent weapon to fight, this otherism that we have. Yeah. That's why I just recently uploaded to Instagram an entire series stories on dualism, because dualism is one of the things that we have to deconstruct, all of us, and decolonize from, really. We regardless of whether we're Christians or not, we have been shoved into, it's one or the other, it's black or white, it's good or bad, it's, like women or men. And this binary thinking has to go away. Like, we have to be able to think more nuanced, in more nuanced ways than that. We have to be able to reimagine, to reactivate our brain, to be able to think beyond the things that we've been given. Because that's it. We've been indoctrinated into, you have been given this and you have to accept it. And you have these two choices. Pick one. It's like, no, I can reimagine and I can pick whatever I want. And it can be a buffet of things if I want to.
Yeah.
So every time I talk about capitalism, they go, well, socialism isn't better. And every time I respond, who mentioned socialism?
Yeah.
Did I mention?
But it's the other option. There's no other option. It's this or this. It couldn't even be a mix. It couldn't be, it's just this or this.
Way, like, it couldn't be. And people tell me, like, okay, then what do you think would work? And I'm like, I can't answer that because we don't have answers for all communities.
Yeah.
We have to sit down in our communities and say, what's going to work for us here and now? Yeah. What do we have to do for us in where we, like, considering where we are, considering our people, considering our demographics, what do we have to do that works for us? Because if I just say, this is the system that is going to work and we are going to just unroll it all over the world, I'm going to be really seriously harming some people in India and in Colombia and even in New York, because what works in San Diego works in San Diego, you know? Yeah. So even like I'm very proud of myself. I just recently became a board member of my daughter's school. So we had to.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. Congratulations.
I didn't think I was going to win, but I did. And we had the first meeting, and it's seven of us, 5 are white people, and then we have my friend and I who ran. They had 2 openings and we ran together and we won. Wow. And having all these conversations, it was a 3-hour meeting, and we just sat down and the discussion was, what does our school need? Not what is the state saying, not what is the city allowing us to do. We comprehend that we have some limitations considering all of that. But at the same time, what does our school need? So San Diego officially didn't close the schools yet, but we did.
Right.
We chose to close the school after having that conversation. This conversation was yesterday. The school closed today, not because the city told us to, not because we have to by law, but because it's the best thing we can do for the students that we have in the community that we have. And what if we all could have those conversations instead of being like, well, I'm doing what the government told me to do. Well, I'm doing what, my boss told me to do. But instead we could sit down and say, like, this isn't working for us. Can we reimagine? Yeah. But the systems of oppression have that purpose to get you to not think anymore. You don't have to think anymore. It is just a cookie cutter. This is your life. And you either accept it or you become a criminal, depending on how much privilege you have, right?
Right.
Because we're all criminals, just not all of us get to pay for our crimes. So what if we instead kind of awaken again? That's why the job is to awaken, to say, like, I get to reimagine. Yeah. And that's what in a way, that's what you and I have done with our careers, right? Like, you have to have a career and it has to look this way and you have to work certain hours and you have to do this. And I was like, no, I don't. Yeah. And I refuse to. And the probabilities of me getting a regular job ever again are slim to none. Like, I have to be, I would
I've burned a lot of bridges as far as career paths go.
Yeah, I would probably have to go to Starbucks and be like, can I be a barista? And they would probably fire me really quickly after, because I at like being quiet or, do you
ever fantasize about that? I always a little bit. Every now and again, I think, I kind of like to work in a supermarket and occasionally stack shelves and occasionally stand at the till and just be like, hey, how was your day? And have nice small talk. And I'm like, there's just nothing in my brain. When I come home, there's nothing going, how am I going to reply to that big conversation, or what big topic am I going to bring up next? I'm literally, I'm like, did I stack that can of tuna the right way around? That's not going through my head. And I'm not meaning to belittle that job. It's a crazy job, but it's a different job as far as headspace. And I on some level, every now and again, I kind of fantasize, because I know that's my option. When I leave this, if I leave this, that's where I'm going. And I'll probably make about the same money, to be honest with you. But way harder work, many more hours maybe, but a totally different headspace. I'm always like, that does sound nice sometimes. Anyway, sorry to sides, but
I think about becoming a bartender. Like, I think that's my job. I'm like, I could be a bartender. Like, I could be, and I tell my husband sometimes when I have bad days, I'm like, why don't we just, let's become bartenders.
I love it. Do you think you can do the spinning bottles? And
yeah. And let's work off days. Like I can work throughout the week, so it's a smaller crowd, and then you work on the weekend, so it's a bigger crowd, and then we meet a lot of people. And he's like, you would last a week.
Yeah. It's such a romanticized vision we have of these things as well, isn't it?
The moment that we're like, I'm going to be late. And they're like, then you're fired. Like there is no freedom inside of the system to be able to be like, I'm not coming in today.
Yeah.
And that freedom.
That's so funny.
But we can't reimagine. We really can,
No.
we can. I follow all these accounts on Instagram of people that go dumpster diving. I consider that too. I think that would be fun. Not necessarily fun, but
it does sound fun though. Cool. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
So
if you can get out of the headset, fun for sure. Like if you get out of like, oh, this is dirty or dangerous or this is fun.
But I follow all these accounts that like go dumpster diving, and they find all these things that are wild to me, like things that I'm like, we throw away so much all the time, and we don't care. Like we are so wasteful and irresponsible, and it's just gross. And I was talking about that with Caleb and just saying, like, what would it look like to say, like, you know what, we don't have to have strawberries all year long. And we actually I don't have to have access to certain foods that just don't grow here. Like, we don't have to. We would be fine if I don't have access to those foods. What would it look like to say, like, we can live differently, like our food, to make laws that say your food have to come for 50 miles around you. And that's it. Like, become sustainable societies. Figure out a way. That's how people lived for years and hundreds of years. And it worked and it was fine, So how can we say, like, okay, let's become sustainable, like in our own communities? And what would it look like to say, what do you want to do? And allow people to do what they want to do. And at the same time say, but you're a part of a community. So like I always think of, I learned this in college. We were, I had to take a class on administration, like business administration. And so it was with the business school, and we were looking at all these Japanese companies and how a lot of Japanese companies, and I don't know if this is true still, like I went to college a long time ago, but a lot of Japanese companies don't have cleaning services. They don't have custodians because everybody cleans. So they just go in a rotation. First, everybody's like responsible for their work space. So everybody cleans their own workspace, but the bathrooms and all of that, they just have a rotation and they just clean it together. And they do that in schools too. So they don't have a lot of custodians in school. They have somebody that is in charge of facilities, but in general, the cleaning is the students and the teachers and the staff do the cleaning together. And I was like, we don't need, like, cleaning is not a fun job. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, my dream in life is to be a custodian for a school of teenagers. That sounds like, yes. Nobody. No. So what if we got rid of all those jobs that nobody wants to do? And instead we did those that nobody wants to together, as communities and be more responsible for our own spaces. And then everybody got to do jobs that they loved and they were passionate about. And they, we get to do both the really shitty jobs and also the ones that we love so much and that we're passionate about. Like, why can we not reimagine society? And we can. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it and I refuse to walk back. Like, I refuse to. And I'm raising all these children that I am demanding that they reimagine too. Not demanding, but in a way inviting them all the time. Like, why? Yeah. Why does it have to be that way? And why couldn't you do this and that? Why? Why? So why can we not just reimagine and allow, like, there is so much fear to think outside of the binary. Yeah. But the only thing outside of the binary is the unknown, and the unknown is not bad. The unknown is just unknown. And so feeling the freedom, like, let's step into the unknown. What's the worst that can happen? It cannot be worse than having 3 billion people below the poverty level. It cannot be worse than 20,000 children dying of hunger a day. Like, it cannot be worse than that.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking, the dualism of, I have this conversation with people. Like my father-in-law is very, very, he's high up in a financial company. And so, like, he's very, capitalistic mindset, very right wing in like how economies should be run and things like that. And there's a lot of sensibility and sense to a lot of those things. I'm not saying it's foolish by any means. The guy is a much smarter guy than me when it comes to something like that. I'd want to put him in charge of my finances before I was, but the conversations you have something like that and you go, did you see Spain just started experimenting with more basic income? And then you start to realize that immediately that's the most terrifying conversation it's a whoa, well, that's socialism. That's too left wing. That's, you know, like, who would clean our toilets? And it's like, well, we could clean our own toilets. You know, it's like, whoa. You know, there's this immediate, like, you know, the society will fall apart. But what's interesting is there's no conversation of like, okay, could we find a middle ground? Could we find a ground where we did, you know, do something with both these? Can you recognize that some societies have no options right now? So Spain was a great example. It had 25% before COVID, 25% unemployment on people under 35, I think it was. If you're under 35, you're just like 1 in 4 chance of not getting a job. So what are you going to do? Right? I mean, and now post-COVID, I mean, things are getting crazy, and more societies are starting to go, we're going to push some basic income here. But it's the thing of having a conversation with someone where you go, oh, I'd like people to have free healthcare. Oh, socialism. I'm like, well, hold on. We allowed socialism over here and over there and over here. I'm talking about people that sit down and go, well, what do we need? That's already happening. It's just happening at the very top with like 10 people instead of 400 million people having a conversation bit by bit in their own groups. And so the very top people start having a conversation going, what do we need? Oh, we need to bail out our $1 billion business. Okay. But isn't that socialism? No one's going to care. Right. But what about the healthcare? Oh, this group, we don't want free healthcare. That doesn't benefit us on any level. And until the conversation starts trickling down, that's not going to happen. But it's the inability to go, well, that's socialism. So what if socialism plus capitalism makes a new ism? Can there be a third ism? Can there be a third way? No, not in a dualistic society, right?
And that's, I wrote something recently and I said oppressive capitalism. I used the sentence oppressive capitalism. And the person, I bet you can guess the gender of the person. This person came to correct me and said, capitalism is always oppressive. You don't need to make the qualifier. And I said, no, that's not true. The reason why I put oppressive capitalism is because there are tenets of capitalism that still serve us and that still serve some communities and some societies. The problem is that the capitalism that we have in America, specifically in the US today, is oppressive altogether. But that doesn't mean that there are aspects of capitalism that have served certain communities and certain, you know, if we look at the history of how we got to capitalism, it was supposed to be a solution. And there were aspects of it that were a solution.
It was a big advancement for a lot of society.
Absolutely.
And all around the world, lots of people benefited.
And it's because we have to be good or bad. Like capitalism bad. No, there are aspects of capitalism that we can rescue and that we can use in certain societies. And there are aspects that we have to let go of everywhere, sure. And there are aspects of everything. It's the same with Christianity. You don't have to let go of all of it. There are aspects of it that are beautiful and that we get to hold on to if we want to. We also don't have to. But it's the same with everything. We have to be able to deconstruct this desire to be inside of dualistic mentalities and binaries, binaries all the time, because also we are unfair, right? Because in the binaries, we're always good. We're always right.
Oh, yeah.
We're always on the good side. We always know better. So that keeps us unhealed too, because we're never confronted with perhaps not, perhaps there is more nuance here and it's more complicated. And perhaps this is right for me, but not right for you. And I have to be able to acknowledge that and consider that and be able to find a common ground, with other people. So the conversations we have to evolve more. And I think we have. I really think societally we have evolved through history. Like we can look at history and we can say, we've evolved. The amount of people that die by violence today is a lot less compared to the amount of people that were dying by violence in the early 1900s. So we are generally evolving. The amount of people that have access to medical care is a lot higher than the amount of people that didn't. Literacy rates are much higher worldwide, that is. Access to food and access to water, a lot of these things. The problem is that today we have more information. We know more. So in the 1900s, they had no idea what children in Bangladesh, that didn't exist, what children in India, what children in Latin America, what children in rural America, or rural US were experiencing. But today we know what everybody's going through. So it feels like it's worse, but we are evolving. And this ability to know the story of the other is going to help us to continue to evolve. Because now I don't just go to the store and buy clothes that I don't know the condition of the person creating them. I know. I absolutely, so I refuse to. absolutely refuse to buy clothes that I know for a fact are being, somebody was abused and
Yeah.
he's treated, and it's literally a slave so that I could get that dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we become more conscious, but I wouldn't have known that in 1902. I wouldn't have known that. So we're doing better, but there's a lot of work, to the raising of the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
The good thing is that the people that are the most set in their ways, the most resistance to change are older people, naturally,
Yeah.
And we all die.
Yeah.
So hopefully more younger people. Younger people are being more aware and more conscious, and we're moving our society. I was telling, who was I talking to? I don't remember, but I was talking to probably a mutual, and I was talking about how just like divorce was a really bad evil for hundreds of years for the church, and just like miscegenation and interracial marriage was absolutely prohibited and it was evil. And now we are like, that's totally, everybody can marry. I mean, there are some churches, but
sure, they're fringe.
In general, most people think like, sure, people from different races can marry, and getting a divorce is appropriate and it's fine, depending, but whatever. We will get to a place where the church has to, not because they want to, but they have to accept gay marriage, and they have to accept gay people because they have to, because they're going to be, otherwise they're going to lose all their money, because enough of us are going to be like, I won't come back unless you accept of these things. So, and that will start changing the dynamics of church. That's what I see the dynamics of church changing,
It does. It changes consistently in different ways. And I think it's fascinating to me. There's a dynamic in human nature that we are terrified of change. We're terrified of the unknown. We're terrified of moving forwards when we, generally speaking, set our ideal in the past, which is the nature of fundamentalism. We want to move backwards, not forwards. And so we fear forward momentum. But what's interesting is when we do, so the danger is, you look at something like, oh gosh, try to help me find something. Interracial marriage. We're terrified. What on earth will happen? My gosh, the end of the world, right? And people were genuinely really, and I don't want to minimize the fact that for whatever reason, they had legitimate trauma and terror wrapped up around what is today a ridiculous notion, and then should have been a ridiculous notion and was a ridiculous notion to many people. I don't want to minimize the horrendous issues that created. But what's fascinating about it is 10 years after, no one really cares, because what happened? Nothing. But the world got better for a lot of people. And for all the people that were scared, nothing got worse. Nothing. Maybe some racist people were like, oh, I don't want to see the eroding of the perfect white nation or whatever. Of course there's those people. But on the whole, most people that bought into this concept, the socialism is evil. And then really, if we made healthcare free for everyone in America and it didn't put up your taxes, didn't cost you anything, and everyone kind of like life was the same, 10 years from now, people would be like, don't take that away from us. We like that. And there's this kind of like slow burn that, I'm seeing in the church in Europe. More churches are starting to accept gay marriage. More churches are, letting go of a lot of things that are still very hot topic in America. But even a lot of churches in America are starting to open those doors. I guess there is this level of privilege, like I'm talking about interracial marriage. Doesn't affect me. I'm married to a white person, right? And so if I was living 60 years ago or whatever it is in the UK, I don't actually know the date in the UK where that changed. It was probably shockingly late as well. But that wouldn't have affected me. And so there's a level of privilege of letting this, and I have been guilty of this. I said in the last podcast I was doing with Leake, I was saying like, there is an element where kids are just, you talk to kids there, they are less, explicitly racist, of course, but even implicitly racist, I think there is less. Now it's still probably very systemically in there, but there's less. Is there an element of like, these things, we give it 50, 100, 200, 500 years. We're kind of naturally going to grow out of a lot of this as a society. That is an extraordinarily privileged position to hold when you're in the place where it doesn't really affect you. It's a lot different if you're a black person that's living today in America to go, well, 100 years from now, black people will, be able to get the same level of education and jobs and, lifestyle and homes and whatever. That doesn't feel so great, I'm sure. And yes, we should do everything we can to go, okay, let's change 500 years to 100 years, or let's change 100 years to 50 years, or let's move it forward somehow. But how do we how do we navigate that dynamic? Because it is a reality that society is moving, society is progressing. Is that something we should be leaning into? Is that something that we should be focusing on? Do we focus our attention on the young? Do we focus, I talk to teenagers and they have no problem if me going, hey, you got some racism there. Like, you want to talk about it? Like, yeah, okay, yeah, God, is that white fragility? And I'm like, you know your stuff already, basically. They're more knowledgeable than me on most things. Like, should we be leaning into these things and focusing less on getting grandma than, I don't know.
Well, it's both and. I think that we probably should let grandma be at this point, because it's too hard. However, if we're talking about a 40-year-old with 3 children, she's shaping minds.
Yeah.
So those conversations need to keep happening, That's why I got involved in the school. I am super involved in my daughter's school, like too much. Like I'm there all the time. Like when it was not COVID, I was teaching classes there for free. Right. My husband.
You wonder why they voted for you, really,
Everybody calls him Coach Caleb, and he knows the names of all the students. Like, we're super involved because we believe that education is very important and schools are very important. And we wanted to make sure that our kids were in a school. Like, we didn't want to homeschool. We wanted our kids to be exposed to different people. And that means, sending them to school with a lot of white kids too, and a lot of kids of families that are Trump supporters and all the things. And that's fine. And being able to expose them so they can have these conversations. But we've been talking with my friend and talking about what I would love to see in the school is not just engagement with the kids and not just looking at the academics and the curriculum that has to be challenged, the history curriculum, all curriculums have to be challenged. So we're having these conversations about staff trainings and about all of that. But then we're talking like, okay, how are we going to engage parents? Because we have to engage parents because they are the ones at the end of the day shaping the minds of these kids, So having the both and how do we engage both? And some of the friends of my kids are full on Trump supporters. And I'm public and my voice is public enough that they know I'm not,
Sure. Yeah.
Being able to sit with them and engage with them, not for the purpose of, we're probably not going to become best friends, but our kids are best friends because kids see the world differently. And so I'm going to have to sit with them and we're going to have conversations and we're going to have to figure things out. And I don't want to shy away from that and only engage with people that agree with me.
Yeah.
Because then we're not moving this thing forward,
Yeah.
So I think that we can do both and recognize what are the spaces where I can have influence. So one of the spaces I could have influence was this school. Like my children, I have 4 children. I'm going to be involved in schools for a very long time. Like a good portion of my life is going to be taking and bringing children from schools. So I might as well get involved and, try to change things out of that. And so recognizing what is the level, where do I have influence and how can I change that? And it's not just with your family. Like, you can have conversations at work. I have a good friend that works at a big company here in San Diego, and she is a administrative assistant. So officially speaking, she doesn't have a lot of power, but she does push a lot of conversations, and they've been able to have all of these really cool seminaries and really cool conversations and to push some policies inside of the whole entire company because of the conversations that she's pushed forward. So being able to say okay, what is it? Where do I have influence and how can I use that influence? So if you don't have children, it's going to be different, right? So you're going to have peers that do have children or peers that are just young enough, that are shaping other people's minds. So if they have influence, I have to engage them. So I might engage grandma if grandma is Margaret Thatcher and, is the prime minister. I will sit down with Margaret Thatcher if she were the prime minister right now. And I would have a lot of words for her. A lot of words for her.
I can imagine.
Yes, because her actions affected millions of people, So I think it depends on level of influence. So a 40-year-old kids has influence, therefore I have to engage. Grandma who talks to her friends who just think the same way as her, probably not as much influence, and that's okay. And, what am I going to do? But if people have influence, I have to engage them. We have to engage them and recognizing those things and understanding that our time is limited. So I want to use my time in the best possible way with the people that are going to make the most change, that I'm able to make the most change. That matters.
Yeah. Okay. Talking of limited time, we're at a 2-hour mark. Have you got time for one more question?
I do.
Okay, good. I don't want to steal your whole day from you. It's still early for you. I'm out of my day. So, I am intrigued by you. You mentioned, we look at the world and it's evolving and it's growing and we're getting to be more, inclusive and loving, and we're raising the poverty level. We are, less people are starving, less people are thirsty, less people are dying of preventable illnesses. I mean, there is a progression that is phenomenal. On every metric apart from environmental, we're making positive strides. I mean, it's astonishing. But it feels to me there's a danger, and I am 100% guilty of this, and I'm asking myself this, and I'm trying to juggle and war with this, that our framing for moving towards a better thing. So a lot of the things I mentioned are just clear kind of metrics. Less people dying, good, right? I think most cultures across the board look around and go, that's a good thing. But it feels like a lot of our metrics for progression and evolution of society and growth, is framed through a white supremacist kind of lens. It's all countries moving towards becoming America or Britain or whatever it is, right? And so it is, we go into Ghana or Nigeria or Indonesia and we say, okay, you're doing great. This is some great, you've got that. But we don't like your God, so that needs to change. Or we don't like that you do business this way, that needs to change. And the thing is, there's things in that where it's like, oh, you don't have this medicine for that thing. Here, have this medicine. Like, there's components where it's like, no, of course, there's some countries that are doing something better than other countries. That is a very measurable thing. And I don't want to take that off the table, right? We're not going to be dualistic about it. But at the same time, in this gray area, there does feel like there's some sort of white supremacist kind of component. How do we navigate, helping people around the world, maybe in our neighborhood, but I'm thinking even more globally where the differences are so stark and obvious. How do we help people move forward and grow and evolve, without presuming that I'm the one that you should be growing towards, or I've arrived, or, like if you just were more like me or my society or my group, then you'd be right. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about, right? When we're talking about something like white supremacy.
I mean, in Colombia, it's better. Like, one of the metrics for our growth is that more people are speaking English. How nonsensical is that? Like, not that more people are bilingual. No, that more people are speaking English specifically, which is ridiculous. Like, why? Why not Mandarin? Yeah. Actually, Mandarin would be more helpful for a lot of people.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yes. Especially considering of the future. Like, like there are things that, like, conversations that we have to have. So yeah, absolutely. We have framed progress and we have framed success inside of white supremacist notions of societies. So, like, that's where we have to reframe, like, what does it mean to have a healthy society? Because if you look at the US, this is not a healthy society. Like, US citizens have a very toxic relationship with the government. It's a toxic, abusive relationship. That's what it is. Now, does it mean that, because when I say that, people are like, well, they move back to Colombia. I'm like, it doesn't mean that Colombia doesn't. Like, calm down. So I think that the conversation that we have to have is, what does it mean to have success? What does it mean to have a good society? And a good society is a society where nobody is lacking in basic rights. Everybody has their basic needs met. Those are the words I wanted to use. Everybody has their basic needs met. That's a good society. That's a healthy society. And unfortunately, even though we want to say, like, oh, the way to arrive at that is these 4 things, that's not how it works. Every single one of them have to decide what that looks like, because what that means for the Philippines, being, islands and having the spread that they have is completely different than what it means for Colombia, where we are all a country inside of a continent. And it's completely different. And we have to have different conversations for those things. So what does it look like for our own communities? And I actually think that, and this is just me, like, I don't know, I'm just like thinking and saying these things, but I think that we have to become smaller This imperialistic idea that we have to just take over and be bigger doesn't work. It would be better for us to just become smaller so that the decisions are made in a smaller scale. So if we can talk about making decisions inside of California and not federally, that would be a lot easier to be able to say like, oh, well, I can maybe think of ideas that are going to help 39 million people. That's how many people we have in California.
Right. It's a huge thing, right? That's a country. I mean, the UK is 70. It's barely, smaller than the UK.
Colombia has 45 million people. Like we are barely bigger than the entire thing of California's economy, if it were a country, would be the 5th economy of the world. Like this is a ginormous place that just happens to be inside of a bigger place. So what does it look like to make things a little bit smaller so that we can guarantee, because if we make decisions at such large levels, if you're making decisions for Europe as a whole, then a lot of people are going to be left out of the conversation. Yeah. So how can we ensure that we're having smaller conversations where more people are represented and where more people are able to say, like, this is actually something that affects me directly, because I cannot make decisions for Kentucky. I've never been in Kentucky. I do not know how people live in Kentucky. I do not know what people need in Kentucky. And I shouldn't be making decisions for Kentucky. That's just the way it is. I shared an article a couple months ago with patrons about how most people in urban areas have never taken the time to actually talk to rural America. And we're all guilty of that, right?
Yeah,
rural America, like we think, rural America, they are just ignorant. No, they are not ignorant. They have a different lifestyle and they have different problems. And we don't get to diminish those problems. The problem is that we continue to make decisions that are so wide and so big, decisions for the whole of America that are unavoidably going to affect people in smaller spaces. So if we could move towards societies that are a little bit smaller and let them make decisions on their own. That's why I don't like nonprofits that have the only nonprofits that I like that are doing international work are nonprofits that are like, listen, these are the resources that we have and we want to put them at your disposal. But the nonprofits that go, hey, these are the ways that things are done and we're going to make them this way, those are not helpful nonprofits because they are not taking into account the society that they are into. And that's imperialistic in it. It's white supremacy. It's empire. So what does it look like to let people recognize where there are more resources and start saying like, okay, we can partner with one another without me, because I'm bringing the resources doesn't mean that I make the decisions. Yeah. Right. And how can we say, okay, I have an excess of resources and you have your people and you are smart. How can we partner with one another? What does partnership look like? Where I don't make decisions for you and you don't make decisions for me, but we share resources with one another. That requires also a high level of healthy people, because then we have to make sure that I am not abusing you and you're not abusing me, and that we trust one another. So it's messy and it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it's possible. It's fine.
No, it is.
Give it 200 years, so we won't see it.
We'll get there. We will get there.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my dad's calling me. But But what if we don't imagine it now? We won't see it in 200 years. No. If we don't start imagining it now and starting to say, "Oh my gosh, what part of?"
Do you want to take it? What?
No, I don't.
Are you sure?
I think he's right outside. He just needs. He's fine.
Oh, okay.
If we don't imagine it, if we don't imagine the society that we want to live in, if we don't imagine what I call heaven on earth, if we don't imagine it, we won't ever happen. And the problem with toxic Christianity, going back to toxic Christianity, which is kind of our lane, is that it tells you that it won't exist. Oh my God, sorry. Is that it tells you it won't exist. The problem with toxic Christianity is that it tells you that heaven on earth won't exist. And the only place where you're going to get it is after you die. So it tells you, don't even imagine it. Don't bother. It's not going to happen. When the invitation that I see of Jesus and the invitation that I see of the prophets and the invitation that I see even inside of Judaism is, no, imagine it. It's possible. We can do it. And heaven happens here. And the work of being, the work of the church is to be heaven, to become heaven on earth for the whole world. That's why Christianity continues to be something that I am even remotely interested in, because those ideas and those notions resonate with me. And I love that. Yeah. And I think it's possible. But if we are convinced that it's not going to happen and we have to wait until we die, then it doesn't matter how we live here. It doesn't matter how we treat people. It doesn't matter what we leave behind even, because at the end of the day, I'm promised heaven. right?
Yeah.
If I just raise my hand at the end of service, I'm promised heaven. If right before I die, I say, Jesus, save me, I'm promised heaven. And that teaches you to have a really shallow life where you don't understand the concept of descendants and ancestors, and that everything we do is going to have a consequence, an eternal consequence, not because you're going to live for eternity, but because we're going to leave something behind for our descendants. So there is an eternal concept here. The concept of whatever Augustine wrote in the 4th century is affecting Christians today. That's eternity. That is the concept of eternity that I'm willing to even consider. So Augustine continues to be alive, not in the best ways too.
No. Yeah. I do not want to be remembered for being an Augustine, right? You know, like you hope that like 1,000 years from now, people are like, look back, look at what Joe did. Like this, we are here because of Joe. You do not want them to be living in a terrible place and saying that, right? I mean, of course. But
how could you?
Oh, right. Gosh, absolutely.
We all leave, even if they don't remember our name, we all leave a legacy behind.
That's how we operate,
Yeah, and that's when people ask me, like, what do you want to do in your life? Leave a good legacy.
Yeah.
You know, I want to leave a better world for my descendants. That's it. That's all I care about. I want to leave a better world for my descendants. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, I don't mean my biological descendants, of course.
Yeah. Just humanity evolving, growing, and being better. I want the world in the future to have a better existence than I've had. And I've had a great existence. You know, it's not to even diminish that, but this could be better for other people. I think that's the danger of this concept of escapism and getting to heaven, and this idea of like, well, the earth is just like, it is what it is. It's not that great. It will never be good. Our goal is heaven. Like, there's not really this mindset of, well, maybe we could be trying to make this a bit better. Maybe there's no point, right? It's like, your kids, your life's going to be a bit hell as well. Like, that's just earth, you know, but you're going to go to heaven anyway. So it's fine. Try and get some people on board.
That's how they explain evil, right? That's how they explain the problem of it's like, well, we're on earth and Adam and Eve ate of that thing. And then that's just the way, that's what we have to expect here.
Right.
Like, you can't expect better here. And so how are you even encouraged to try to do better? You know, and the only way that you can make the world better is just ensure everyone becomes Christian so that when they die, well, that doesn't make the world better. We've proven that.
Right.
We have absolutely in 2,000 years proven that having more Christians in the world doesn't make the world better. Yeah. What we have to do is have more conscious people. And conscious people can be found in any faith adjacency, in any belief system or lack of belief system. Conscious people are just humans that have chosen to heal instead of continue to cope. And
it's beautiful.
If I were to rate it, I think that it's actually the most religious people, like the most attached to the religion, the most resistant to healing, because it requires for you to admit that your faith is not enough, and they can't.
Wow. I can 100% agree with my empirical evidence or maybe my more anecdotal evidence, but I've seen empirical evidence that points to that as well. There's different faith measurements, different scales that you can use to measure people's faith, and traditional, fundamental, religious people always score very low on maturity of consciousness, of being aware and self-aware. So it's there, like we see it when we just sit down and look and observe. Wow.
You have data for that. That's totally like how you operate. You have the data and the numbers.
I can't help but have some data. I always have some data for it somewhere. Joe, you are honestly one of my absolute favorite conscious people. If there are people in this world that are awake that I am looking to, you are definitely one of them. And I'm so thankful that you're in this space doing this work. I'm so privileged to be just in the same room, you know, at least electronically. It's such a joy to have you on, to have these conversations. I really appreciate the conversation, the space that you're creating. Can you plug what you're doing a little bit? How do people connect with you? To be honest with you, I'm going to be amazed if people are listening to this that don't know you. Like, I mean, there's maybe a handful, but I mean, I'm always sharing your stuff. I'm always telling people to follow you, but hopefully, some people have tracked this down. If they've come across this, they don't know who you are. Instagram, your number one place to be. Is that a place to follow you?
Share most of my stuff on Instagram. I talk a lot on Twitter and share a lot of the things that I talk on Instagram on Twitter, but on Twitter I'm a little bit more sassy, so that's kind of fun because it just goes with the platform.
Yeah, that's the platform. I need to get back on Twitter.
It's fun. Come back. I'll welcome you. We'll talk and we'll make fun. No, so I'm on Twitter, but I'm a little bit more sassy there, which is really fun. Somebody told me, have I told you this? That Instagram is LA. It's like Los Angeles.
Okay.
Maybe this will make sense for people in the UK, but maybe it will. Facebook is Florida, but Twitter is New York.
Facebook is Florida. If there is anywhere there is Florida, it's Facebook. Oh, Jesus.
So Facebook is Florida. Instagram is LA, where people care a lot about what they look like, and there is a lot of optics, and you're very careful about what you're writing. But Twitter is LA, where everybody kind of has their own thing, and people are more sad. Oh no, I'm sorry. Twitter is New York City.
New York.
People are more whatever, and there is a little bit more of irreverence almost. So
I love it. That's cool. That's awesome.
So I play to those dynamics in all of these social media, but I'm in all of them. The one that I engage in the most for sure is Instagram, and that's where I talk to them. And I of course have a Patreon and all of those things, but you can find them in my page.
No, that's awesome. People, there will be show notes with Instagram, Twitter links, Patreon links. Get doing it. Get supporting Joe as well. Like doing work for free is it's a scary venture at times, and it's in my opinion, it's one of the most admirable things people can do. I'm not just patting myself on the back for saying that, but I'm in awe of people that do it. I genuinely think it's such a brave thing to do with kids as well. I frequently am terrified about having kids because I'm like, what will that do to my mindset, my psychology? Like, I don't even know, because I'm pretty shoot from the hip as a very controlling person right now. My control is going to jump a whole nother level when I have kids. I know it. I'm ready. So I just...
Maybe both will happen, because there is a lot of things that you can absolutely not control.
I'll have to let go of. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I can't. So let's just figure this out. But yeah,
absolutely.
Children change dynamics for sure.
Yeah. No, they will. They will.
I do want to say thank you for having me again. I'm happy to talk to you anytime. And I mean, we don't have colleagues officially, but we are colleagues, right?
It feels like it, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm happy to be your colleague. I love to do this work alongside you. And I feel like I have an ally in you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
There's space for me too.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Joe. I hope you have a wonderful day, a really a great Christmas and everything. I'm sure we'll catch you on the other side at some point. It would be great to have you on again. I'd love to have you on frequently. These conversations are so great. I mean, we didn't even, for people that don't know who Joe is, we did an introduction conversation 6 months ago or something. Go back and find that.
You were like, hi. And then we started talking.
Oh, I've been talking about this all week to my wife. I'm like, I have got so much to ask Joe. And I don't even know if I asked half the things that I had in the back of my head. I made a list somewhere and I don't even know. But I was like, we are going in. We are doing this. I mean, I know you as well. We can do small talk, but we're not small talk, right? We want to dive into this stuff. We love it. And so I figured let's make the most of it. So, and I appreciate you giving me so much time as well. It's been fantastic. But Joe, I love you. Thank you so much. Yeah, have a good one. Yeah, I'll let you know when this comes out. It'll probably be late next week or the beginning of the week after, I think.
Yeah,
but I'll let you know.
But have a happy Christmas and then say hi to your wife.
I will do. All right. Bye.